Why does outing someone matter? At the easiest, basest level, outing someone is just rude. But it's also a lot more than that. LGBTQ+ folks are still stigmatized in most of the world, and so a lot of us want to keep quiet about our identities, whether sexual or gender. It might sound weird to be fighting for rights, for acceptance, while still hiding, but it's a method of survival. For folks who are in the closet, so to speak, being outed can do a ton of damage. In many countries, being outed as gay or bi can lose your job or your home, or, in the worst cases, your life. And even in countries where sexuality is protected, like Canada for example, it can still lead to social ostracization, especially in some smaller communities where word can travel very quickly. Furthermore, even in countries where sexuality is protected, gender identity isn't always. In Canada, again, sexuality has been protected under our Charter of Human Rights and Freedoms for quite a while, but we're still having to fight the fight to get gender identity protected under the same document. This effectively means that if you're outed as trans, your employer or landlord can still oust you and claim to not be breaking the letter of the law. For a lot of trans folks, passing requires being in the closet. This is also known as being stealth. Passing means that everyone who meets a trans person assumes that their gender presentation indicates their sex at birth. In other words, a trans person who passes is assumed to be cis. Cis simply meaning the opposite of trans. If you're passing and in the closet, then you're stealth. For some trans folks, being stealth is part of being trans. It causes dysphoria to talk about their history or to talk about their transition, and so they choose to be stealth to be healthier and happier. For some people, it's simply preference. Other trans folks choose not to be stealth. In any case, it's up to the person whose life it is to choose who knows and who doesn't know about their trans status. Let's say you have a friend, Rob, who you've known since you were kids. When you were first introduced to Rob, he was being called Louise. Over the years, Rob confided in you, told you he was trans, and asked to be called Rob. You're a great friend, of course, you call him Rob. You respect his identity. You use male pronouns for him. Now, you and Rob have gone off to university. Hey, it's the same university. Awesome. You're still friends, but now no one else knows about Rob's history. One day you're talking to a mutual friend, and Rob isn't in the room. You get to talking and you're telling stories about crazy stuff you guys did as kids, and you tell a story about you and Rob, but you accidentally use the name Louise. This mutual friend stops and goes, I don't think I've met Louise. If at this point in time you say, oh, you have, he just goes by Rob now, you've outed Rob. Not explicitly, but you've still outed him. This could change how your mutual friend thinks about Rob. It could change whether your mutual friend still wants to be friends with Rob. It can change whether your mutual friend still thinks of Rob as a person. And in any of these cases, this friend could then go on to tell all their other friends about Rob. This would mean that suddenly, people that Rob doesn't know, hasn't met, would know that when Rob was born, his parents were told he was a girl baby. And maybe Rob doesn't care. Maybe Rob has been meaning to be out to everyone. But maybe Rob wants to be stealth. And that decision should be up to Rob. It's his life, and it's his decision, who knows? Because the only person it really affects is him. If, after the mutual friend has said, I don't think I've met Louise, you realize you've said the wrong thing. You were caught up in the moment, you're used to being around people who know, or you just flubbed. You can still avoid outing Rob. Dodge the question, start telling a new story, whatever. In either case, your next move should be to tell Rob. Hey, I accidentally told that story about the time we did that thing to so-and-so, but I used the name Louise. Tell him who you told the story to, and that way, he can now make the decision of either never sharing that story around that person ever again, or he can talk to that person and and come out to them, or whatever. But it makes it his call. If you do accidentally out someone, tell them. Acknowledge that you screwed up, and respect their anger. This is their life, and it can be irreparably damaged by being outed. Or it can simply take the choice out of their own hands. In any case, you fucked up. Even in queer spaces, it's really important to acknowledge that the choice to be out belongs to the person in question. Most LGBTQ plus spaces have safe space policies, which mean that if you see someone around outside the LGBTQ organization, you don't say, "Hey, I saw you at the queer place!" Instead, you say something like, "I saw you at the center," or some other code word or phrase that they advise you use. This is especially important in small, enclosed communities like universities or high schools. However, this should also be aimed inwards. If you go into the queer center and say, "Next week I'm going to come in with a friend who's trans," and then the next week you show up with Rob, you've just outed Rob. Yes, you've outed him to people who are sympathetic, but you've still taken the choice out of his hands. So in summary, it's up to the queer person in question to decide who knows and who doesn't know that they're queer. This can be for personal comfort or for personal safety. It doesn't matter which, it's still their call. How about when people ask you about your gender or sexuality and feel they have a right to know? This one is obviously related to the last question in this video. If you're like me and you're very out, this can come up a lot. It also comes up when you first come out to people. Recently, Laverne Cox and Carmen Carrera, two very outspoken and out trans actresses and advocates, were on Katie Couric's show. The only topic their hosts seemed to want to talk about was their genitals, and what their genitals looked like, and how their transitions went, and what does it look like now? This is a really, really common experience for LGBTQ folks who've come out to their families, and for LGBTQ folks in the media. In the process of writing the script for this answer, I've written, rewritten, edited, deleted, and completely changed this section about 12 times. I thought about speaking from family members' points of view, about talking about celebrities. I thought about treating this a lot of different ways. But all I can really say is, it sucks. Just, whenever people ask you questions like, "Well, what do your bits look like?" It's like they're saying that my bits, that my genitals, that my DNA is more important to the way they're gonna treat me than who I am as a person. It's like, I don't matter. All that matters is some thing that happened because of the way that my father's DNA mixed with my mother's DNA, and that DNA mixed with the way I was brought up in the world. Like, that matters more than my thoughts, experiences, my feelings, my emotions, my desires, my goals in life. Like, my genitals, which no one other than my partner will ever see. Like, my genitals are more important than me. If someone in your life has recently come out as trans or queer to you, ask yourself if you would ask those questions of a cis or straight person. Would you ask, "Well, what do your genitals look like?" to any random friend or acquaintance? Would you ask the same random friend or acquaintance how they have sex? Treat your LGBTQ plus friends and family like people, which is what they are. And everything will be better for everyone, including you. When you act as though you have a right to know every detail of your queer friends or family members' experiences and lives, you're saying that their right to privacy, their right to be treated like anyone else, are lesser to you than your desire to know about them. Think about how you would feel if someone did that to you. Think about why you think you deserve to know. If you're just curious, literally you're just like, "I have never experienced this thing, I don't know what it's like, I would love to know," use Google. Then if Google doesn't fully answer your question, turn to your queer friend and say, "Hey, I know this might not be any of my business, but," acknowledge that they have the right to say that actually no, it's none of your business. If you're told no, don't push it. Since I've come out to my parents, my mother has actually been one of the best examples of how to ask these questions without being invasive and rude. She'll usually put them to me as, "I don't want to be rude, but I don't know the right way or the right words to ask this," or something similar. This makes it very, very clear that she acknowledges my right to take offense at what she says, or usually what she's repeating. And furthermore, my mom knows not to ask just anyone. I've told her that I want to be a resource, and so she can treat me as such. So when she has a question about someone new who started at work recently, she comes to me and says, hey, someone said this, what does that mean? Rather than in the middle of a work meeting saying, what do you mean when you say this? Which is what some people will do. I also have a story from the opposite side of things. My grandmother and I used to have semi-regular lunches, where we meet up somewhere, pretty nice, have lunch, talk about things, school, work, my cousins, what this and that family member is up to right now, who's having a baby, whatever, the usual chit-chat. At one of these lunches, a friend of mine came up. They were in a photo of me on Facebook, and my cousins had recently been showing her how to use Facebook. She asked me about this friend, and she said, is there anything you want to say about them? No? Are you sure? I don't know what you're getting at. Well, from the photos... After a few minutes of this, my grandmother forced me, essentially, by taking me to that edge of she wouldn't say the word, so I had to, in order to end this conversation. She forced me to out this friend, and subsequently myself, in order to explain our identities. Because she claimed that anyone could tell from the photo. When I came out as genderqueer, in that same conversation, she said to me that everyone dislikes their body sometimes, and that it's not a reason to change myself. Be like my mom, not my grandmother. Think about why you want to know, and what you want to know. Acknowledge people's right to privacy and to be treated like people. And don't erase their identities when they tell you them. How about another topic when people about How about another topic when people about wow, this is really poorly written. I don't know what I was doing here.